Hello, everyone. Welcome to the VR Verdict Podcast, episode 144, our weekly podcast where we talk about everything VR. I'm PJ.
I'm Wookie.
And joining us is Jack.
Hello.
Hey. Jack's here to talk about Noun Town. This is your child, your creation?
Brainchild.
Yeah, that's right. This Noun Town. I'm just using the space. We are in virtual reality, right? So we should make use of it.
I can't get my face any closer to it. It's gorgeous.
Please, that's how you learn better. You get your face closer to the subject matter. Yeah, I mean, it's a team effort. Noun Town is a huge team effort of volunteers and contractors and employees. But we hope to create the best possible language learning experience outside of being in a country and learning while you're there. That's the goal, the lofty aim.
It looks so polished. It'd have to be a huge team. Like everything just looks little Z's coming over the sleeping animals and the fruit. Everything just like.
Yeah, we have an awesome art director. He's super talented. He came up with this style, which is like sort of a place, but no place. It's kind of like in between anywhere. It's really internally consistent. And best of all, it uses like very few polygons, which means we can run it on the Quest 2.
Nice. So yeah, if you just want to tell us a little bit about the game, I know there's like 6 languages, and as you learn, you bring color to the world. Just kind of give us a brief rundown of that, and for the listeners, I guess.
So Noun Town is a language learning game. The idea is that when you play Noun Town, you will become better at the language that you want to learn. I mean, that's like the core part. And to facilitate that, we've come up with all kinds of design ideas and gameplay features which centralize language learning and language interaction as part of your experience. So it's not like some kind of game where you just like go through forms and there's a 3D background and you click the right multiple choice answer or something, right? We didn't think that was a very useful way of teaching language learning. So we tried to create this immersive world where anything you want to know the name of, you can like look at it and it's annotated, or you can pick up the object and hold it to your ear and you hear a native speaker say the word in the language that you want. And we tried to come up with ways in which the gameplay and the progression system reflected your language learning. So that's why the world is in black and white, because when you don't know a language, it's kind of like, man, this place is really alien and scary. Mm-hmm. But as you start to get better at language learning, at the language that you are learning, the world kind of makes sense to you. The culture makes sense to you. The ability to kind of exist and interact in that space makes sense to you. And so we kind of reflected that by just doing that in our game with this dark gray world. As you learn a word, the color emanates outwards from what we call chromometers, which are color towers. Then as you learn more and more of the words in the game, these get bigger and bigger. And any object that you learn individually colors in when you learn it. And it's decolored when you don't learn it. So that's like this core part, but there's also like layers and layers of this. Yeah. So it's we've got this really focused on this idea of task-based learning, which is this linguistic theory idea. But essentially it means you centralize all of the language learning as the core gameplay facility. So when we design games, we're not like, how quickly can you move your hands to do this? We're actually like, how can we use language learning as the thing that you have to get better at in order to progress in this game? And so one example is our Learning Rush game, where you serve customers. So they come up, they say a word that you've already learned in the language that you're trying to learn, and then you have to look around the objects and pick it up and throw it at them as quick as possible. So you are trying to respond with speed, but the real thing is your recognition of the object. And if you're not sure, you can like pick up objects and put them to your ear to check what the word is. But actually, the way you get better at that game is you learn words better. The way you get a higher score is you unlock more words, which increases the multiplier. So throughout the whole game, there's this concept of language learning as gameplay feature. And beyond that, you've got like 70 verb mini games. So when you learn the verb to cut something, you pick up a knife and you cut some fruit. When you learn the verb to wash, you pick up a hose and you wash down the cow that's particularly muddy. And then there's conversations you can have with NPCs. So if you want to know about an NPC, you don't select the dialogue option, right? You actually have to say the words, like, what is your favorite color? What do you like? Where do you come from? In the language that you want, and then they'll respond. So the whole game is built around this concept of language-first interaction.
Yeah, that's, I gotta say, like, you reached out and you're like, hey, you want to check this out? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll check anything out. And I kind of
Did you
knew
feel
about
real
it
special?
before you reached out. Well,
Oh,
no,
really?
just let me get there though. Because there's been a few other language apps and things, and it's like kind of what you described first off. Like, it's kind of just like doing the same type of learning in VR. You know, it's just words and audio, not very interactive or interesting. Within 2 minutes, I of starting up Noun Town, I was like blown away, and I learned like 4 words I didn't know, and it was awesome because, like you said, with the coloring growing out, like, you just kind of like know what's going on, even though, like you said, you kind of feel alienated at the start. But you pick up an item and you, like you said, hold it to your ear, you hear it, and then you hold the trigger and you actually talk, and then it gets your enunciation and all that stuff, and it blings, and it's just like the whole presentation of what you guys have going on here is really impressive. And I think I was just telling Wookie before you popped in here, like, I think if you legit put 30 minutes a day into this, you'd learn that language pretty dang quickly.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's super nice to hear. Because when we were building it, we were like, oh man, are we going to do something terrible? Like, we felt like no one had really done this before. We felt like education technology generally hadn't really like leaned into the gameplay side. It had leaned into gamification, where it gives people high score charts or makes them do streaks, but we really felt that they hadn't actually leaned into a gameplay side of things. So we were like, can we give an example of where educational technology can actually be a game? Like, people play it and they want to be there. They're not like, I have to do this to learn. They're like, I want to be in this. It's a fun thing. I feel good when my learning is improved through the world that I'm interacting with. And so it took a little time to think about that.
Yeah, it's really cool. And you're like in an area and it's all black and white. You pick up an item and you say it. And if, like you said, there's multiple of those items, like if it's a piece of fruit in the grocery store area, all those light up in the whole area. Is really neat to kind of see that. And just, it's really, really makes you want to keep going. And that's another cool thing. Like, you have a lot of science behind this game. You can just tell, like, I don't know if it's 5 or 6 words. It says, hey, you've learned enough for right now. Come back in like 3 hours. And there's a counter like, you shouldn't learn anymore yet. Let this sink in. If you want to go through like the science behind it, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I should warn you, my PhD is in virtual reality and embodied cognition through language learning. So it is a very dense and boring 200 pages. I will cut that down
and go.
It'll be in the after show.
What is science? Yeah, right. It's maybe I can sell copies to my thesis. The only person who's ever had more than 3 people read their thesis. So there's a lot of different approaches. We kind of took the approach of kind of trying to put in as many different approaches as possible, because there's a lot of different ways in which people consider language learning works for people. Our overarching one is we aim for communicative competence, right? What we're trying to do is not teach people the grammar that allows them to construct sentences in their head and then try to interact. We're less interested in that. There are like 75 lessons in the game, but what we're really aiming at is this idea of communicative competence, where if you go into another country, you can be like, food, please, coffee and milk. And then from that, you can build on, which is what we think and some theorists think is a more naturalistic way of learning a language, right? When you're a child, you don't say nothing until you can say, Mother, would you be able to pass me the milk, please? Right? That's not that's not how we. And when you're kind of living in another country,
that's how Wookiee came out. But other than that,
fully developed everything.
That's it, right? So when you go to another country as well, most of the time, if you're living there for a long time, you are not coming out with full sentences. You're kind of negotiating the meaning with the limited vocabulary you have. So that's the approach we're taking with this, which is why it's always listening to the words first. It's speech recognition first. It's not reading and writing down the words first, right? They're kind of secondary to this idea of being able to communicate. And that is kind of what really inspires people, right? When you ask people why they want to learn a language, often it's to go to the country, to meet people, to be able to have an experience in that country. So that's where we've led from. And from that, there's a whole bunch of things. I'm going to run through them super quickly. One is the immersivity, right? So, and the context. So learning in a context. And if you take a phone app where you're learning like a bunch of words, they're totally decontextualized, right? You'll learn on the same screen, on the same interaction, the word for beach as you will for courthouse, right? Or sadness, or so. And you're doing the exact same thing in the exact same place. So you don't really form any, like your brain doesn't form any connections around that word. Whereas what you can do in VR is you can be like, well, now you're at the beach and you're surrounded by beachy things, and your words, when you learn these, you'll be able to memorize them. So we've got this sense of context, but there's another layer, which is this sense of embodied interaction. And that stems from grabbing objects, but also making actions with those objects. So there's this school of thought called I think it's the body object index or body object interactions. I finished my PhD about 6 months ago, so I've clearly forgotten all of the information. But it's the idea that, yeah, thank you. Don't tell my supervisor; she'll be so disappointed. But it's the idea that objects that you can pick up and interact with are better memorized than ones that are more abstract that you can't interact with. So, for example, it's a lot easier for you to remember the words for like controller or drink or cheese than it is to remember words like mountain or sky, and even more abstract like justice and honor. So our brains are kind of hardwired to better memorize things that are kind of within our field of touch and interaction. So things that your hands can manipulate. So that's why we made basically all the objects in the game pick upable and movable, which is quite a big technical challenge. If you think of a lot of VR games, there's not 100 objects in a scene you can pick up and move around.
You can ask any dev, like, why didn't you do more? They're like, do you know how much work that is?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Again, I was impressed first off because like there are 100, I won't say hundreds, but there's a lot of grabbable objects in each area. That's I kind of was shocked by that because of what we just said.
And it also causes a lot of interaction and problems as well, right? So if you distance grab something and it comes towards you, if you don't do some extra coding, it's going to collide with everything on the way, just sending everything out, which is what happened in our initial release. We only patched that like a week ago. And so there's all kinds of
explodes.
Right, exactly. There's that learning rush game, and so many people are like, when I grab an object from a distance, it knocks all the other objects out the way, and then I can't get them, and then someone's coming up to me and they're asking me for like chicken, and the chicken's now 3 meters away, Jack. How am I supposed to get the chicken? And anyway, we've resolved that, and I never want to see the word chicken again.
You're traumatized.
Right? I can't go back into Noun Town. Yeah, so there's this sense of object interaction, but that also extends to verbs, right? So there's lots of evidence that learning verbs in a second language is better memorized when you do the action. So to learn the word for pour is better if you pick up the object and do a pouring action. That will form the memorization better. So we use that as well. Yep. And then there's some more stuff. There's something called the production effect, which was researched by a guy called McLeod. And he said if you're learning another language, you want to start speaking it, right? If you start like speaking the words, even if you're just memorizing individual words, you need to speak those words for them to form a memorization in your brain. And his argument is that there's something implicit about saying the words that form stronger memorizations. So the act of like manipulating your mouth to produce those sounds makes it stay in your brain better, which is why we make everyone say the words, right? They have to talk to characters, etc.
Right. That seems like a missing link from a lot of other better than some, but better than most maybe learning tools is actually having to say it.
Yeah, and also it matches quite well with virtual reality because there's this thing in language learning called production anxiety, which is when you're in a classroom. You don't want to try saying the language in front of your peers because you're embarrassed or scared or frightened. Whereas when you put on a VR headset, you kind of feel like you can do what you want. Like the rest of the world doesn't matter.
And
We have. Oh, go ahead.
sometimes I have no concept of that because as a kid in high school in French class, they were saying, like first day, the student teacher was like, does anybody already know any French, whatever? And stupid me, there was always these commercials for this bear that would teach you French, and it just had a couple people saying languages on it. And I said, yeah. And I said, I heard a language or a line on TV once, and for some odd reason, I'm really good at replicating some language. Somebody taught me Laotian once, like an insult, and I still remember how to say it to this day. I just sometimes it triggers and picks up. So I was like, I just mimicked the commercial, and I said, "Je suis la jeune fille," and see, I can still remember how to say that, and that was like 25 years ago. And she started laughing at me, and I was like, what did I say? And she's like, you perfectly said, and bravo on doing it, but you just said I'm a little girl and I'm not a little girl. And everybody started laughing at me, and I'm like, but I said it right. It was like 15 minutes of shame, but I was like, I know some French. Wow. Mad.
Congratulations. You're still getting better, I see.
Yeah, hopefully.
To some of your points, though,
anxiety.
Yeah, with that, like, you're 100% right, because we have had devs guess, like, hey, when I reach out to them, they're like, hey, I don't feel comfortable talking because English isn't my first language, which to my initial reaction to that is, that's bullshit. You know more than one language. You should never feel bad about that, because I don't know any more than one language. Like, that kind of makes me mad that people feel that way, in a nice way. But they come in here in VR, like you said, you put the headset on and you feel like there's just that layer taken off of like if you are nervous or VR takes that away, but then it lets you be in the same room and interact. And that's, again, to your point, why we do the show in VR, because it used to be audio only, and you do a call, it'd be a call and you just sit there and just kind of talk at each other. You can't see or interact. Just these simple hand gestures really makes you feel like after you leave there, you'll feel like you've hung out with us in a room and had an actual conversation, I hope. But it makes the conversation way more lively than just straight up normal talking to each other. So VR really does, close that gap in a lot of ways to bring all that together. And I think with your app and the learning the language, it really does super well with that.
Yeah, and there's also like another layer to that as well. So there's like a lot of virtual reality research into exposure therapy. So there's a famous one where people are scared of spiders and they get them in VR and they get them closer to being with spiders. And there's a more funny one where they're undergraduate students who are intimidated by talking to attractive women. And so they got them in and they got them to speak to attractive avatars. And then after some of this process of exposure therapy in VR, they rated their anxiety in real life situations as much lower. So not only could they approach those things in VR because the anxiety was lower, but that transferred over to the real world. So it's kind of a way to safely practice things, which you then transfer those skills into the real world as well. So there's almost two layers to it. One is you feel less anxious, and then two is because you can experience it safely, you then feel less anxious when you take it into the physical space.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So yeah, that's another part of it. And the other, a big one, a huge one, is motivation. We were like, how can we show language learning? How can we experience language learning in a way that isn't just you've moved on to the next class or congratulations, you got 3 correct. And so that's why we have colors, and the color is intrinsically linked to some graphic effect, but also some life on the island. So as the color stems outwards, an old flower stand will suddenly have someone that stands there, and you can learn colors based on interacting with her florist flower stand. So like different things get unlocked as you progress. And also that extends even to conversations. So you can ask the characters questions, and as you ask them more questions get unlocked, and also your relationship with them builds, and they unlock more chat options. And that also allows us to go from formal dialogue when you talk to a stranger in many languages to informal dialogue. So as you ask them more questions, it unlocks more chats, and those chats start off all formal, but by the end they're relatively informal, as if they're your best friend.
Nice.
Um,
That's really smart. I gotta say, I'm kind of a mumbler. Wookie can attest to that. So
What's that? You were mumbling
once I learned that,
again.
what'd you call me?
You're mumbling again.
Once
Should I get
I
closer?
learned that, once I learned that in your game or app, whatever you want to call it, like you had to hold the trigger down and say the word and enunciate. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have a problem with this. And so far, I haven't had a problem. So that's kind of amazing to me because again, other games and apps with like voice commands and recognitions, sometimes there's been a problem, which helps me learn to get over that. But yeah, I haven't had an issue with you yet with Noun Town yet, so that's pretty
That's
cool.
great to hear. You'll definitely find some. Not like I'm trying to check people out of not buying my game. Buy my game. It's great. But it like speech recognition is very difficult, and also one of the big problems is kind of where you choose someone is right or wrong, right? Because not only are there many ways to correctly pronounce a word, like in British English, bath and bath are like the same word, and both are valid pronunciations. But it's also like different. If you, what's a good example? The idea that you have to say like a word with a masculine or feminine article before it. So like in German, das and die, and that even has neutral as well. You have to kind of, when we get that back, we have to compare what someone has said, what we think they've said, with what we're looking for, and then decide whereabouts is the error. So if they're like saying like maybe that will give us multiple e's in the word the, and then we're like, do we want to consider that as correct or wrong? Because it is correct, but it's also like not how you would naturally say it perfectly. So where is the line between right and wrong, and how can we draw that? And that's been a tough thing for us to work out.
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge.
And we definitely get it wrong in places. So if you notice that, there's a report button to be like, we think this word is too hard.
I did get
That's
that
good.
once saying that, and it was a quick, painless thing. Like normally, like that kind of pop up stops the game, and like it's a whole thing to fill out. Yours is real quick. Hey, this didn't seem like maybe it caught on report or whatever. Like it was really nice. The one time it happened to me.
Well, thank you. But the first time it happens, you're like, this is nice. The 50th time, you're like, this is the worst game in the world. 1 star on the Quest store. Well, you know what? It was really interesting. I remember having discussions with some of the other developers on it, and we were talking about. So what you do is you go in one of the learning spaces, you learn 5 words that you're told to learn, then you go up and test them on the kiosk, and it then goes through those 5 words, and you have to do speech recognition correctly. And one of the developers was like, do you know people can cheat on this? And I was like, what? And they were like, you can like go up and the kiosk will show you the word that you have to learn. And you can just like walk into the space, pick up the object, listen to it, come back and then say the correct answer. How do we prevent this? And I was like, we don't want to prevent that, right? We want people to find ways to learn and able to get through the game. The outcome is not they successfully get 5 on this test. The outcome is that they learn the words. And the test is a way of reflecting that. And so with Noun Town, it's really interesting because we're trying to like not put in constraints on people's interactions so that they can learn in a way that's best for them, but also allowing them that space to explore things, which is why you can kind of skip any word if you're struggling with it. You're like, okay, I think I've got it, but I'm just going to skip it. So it's quite different to a normal game where you kind of put artificial hurdles in front of players that they have to surmount. It's kind of a softer way of interacting, I think.
And I think that's smart because if you got stuck on something, you're just like, you know what, screw this, I can't progress, I'm not coming back to this app. Because I've seen that happen. So that's good. Give the user the choice to police themselves.
Yeah, that is it. It's people are in charge of their own learning, right? Because the outcome of Noun Town is not complete the game. We want them to feel confident in a language. And so people can do what they want. That's what our Noun Town motto is. And good luck to you.
And I'm interested, like, because like you said, like Noun Town isn't really like anything, but it feels like a place. like the design is very unique where you have these areas to learn things, but then you have this airship you go back to, like just kind of the whole setup. Like, how did you happen upon like or decide on like, hey, we have an airship and then there's the town and the interaction between that? Like, how did that come to be?
Yeah, so we always wanted to. It really started with this idea of bringing color back as a great way of exploring and depicting language learning. And we always wanted an island for it to be situated, and we wanted people to feel that they were in this place, and we wanted to put life into the island, kind of like, I don't know, Stardew Valley, Harvest Moon, Animal Crossing. We wanted this feeling of being in a location, and that location responds to you. So the idea of the island and the places was always there. We also wanted to kind of come up with some explanation as to why you needed to learn this language in the game. We didn't want to make it too heavy, but we were like, there has to be like some kind of reason why this place unlocks as you progress. So the rough underpinning story is you are some kind of researcher or scientist or something from this agency that comes to islands that have lost their color. And through your technology and your process of learning and expanding your brain, it works with these technological systems to expand the color back to the island, and then you kind of bring the island back to life. And this was kind of informed by like cultural languages that are less used now. Often I think of Welsh in the United Kingdom, where there are fewer speakers than like the past 100 years or so. And the idea that if we don't use these languages, they do kind of like shrink up and evaporate, and that's a really big loss, I think, culturally.
Yeah.
So that kind of informed it, the idea of, well, how can we make sure that language continues? And that's kind of what we were doing with this, is language is linked to culture and life. And in the game, you come in to kind of help expand culture and life back to this island, which has gone gray and sad. And so that kind of led to us being like, well, we need somewhere that you come in on. And we always wanted to have a place where you could customize your learning. So on the airship, what you can do is there's a machine we call the fabricator, which you can pick any object you've learned, and then you can fabricate a copy of it, and then it stays in the place you leave it around your airship. So we wanted a customizable home space where people can go, I'm struggling with this word, I'm going to keep a copy of it so I can easily check it. Or I'm really proud I got this word, or even just I want to play with the space and have 100 manatees on my airship, which is possible. So we wanted this location. And so yeah, well, you know, it happened. It happened to me when we were building the game. There was this glitch, which meant when you made one thing, it made about 300 of them. So I ended up with an airship full of manatees. And it was the day after we deployed the code to anytime you create something, it saves it into your user account. So it's always there. So every time, normally you just turn it off and on and you'd be fine. But after that day, every time I turned on, there was still 300 manatees in my ship. And the saddest thing is we built a gun to like shoot at objects to destroy them. And that was before we put in the animals. And then we were like, oh no, now I have to shoot 300 manatees to get my ship back. It was like the saddest day of my VR life.
You gotta save that for like the sequel game. Like, all right, I'm going back into Noun Town with a gun.
Noun Town's taken over by like, you know, some weird thing. There's animals everywhere, and you gotta shoot them to learn them.
That's right. When we work out that no one's buying educational games, we'll be like, okay, well, Noun Town 2, Revenge of the Words.
Revenge of the Words.
So that kind of all came together to form this airship. And we wanted a single place where you kind of start, because there's no menu when you load in. We want it to be like quite frictionless to get to that experience where you do your regular tests. So there's a repetition system that automatically keeps track of words you've learned and gives it to you at ideal intervals to help your memorization. It's called spaced repetition. And so that is right there. You have the other words that you place around you to help learn, and you can kind of teleport, and you get to see the island from a distance and go, oh, look at the sense of progression I've got, which is also something we really wanted in that space.
It's really cool.
That's really
like a lot of games, you know, like shooter games, everything. There's like a checkpoint on a mini map, and people aren't looking at the world; they're looking at the HUD. And I think that's actually damaging to people's intelligence and all the other senses. So like yours said, it's actual spatial and visual communication of progress and objectives and things. That's really cool.
Yeah, but I also 100% don't blame them, because having an entire island on like a draw screen is super resource intensive. In fact, I still spend a lot of my time being like, how can we optimize this again? Because we want to support the Quest 1, which is like way less powerful than the Quest 2, but we don't want to exclude those people from access. And also we're in talks to put it on other platforms. So and the other VR headsets. So Meta has this awesome technology called ASW, asynchronous space warp, which allows you to get like 30% more power out. So it's, I don't know if you guys know about it. It's essentially, you can, I don't know if you guys know about it, but you can essentially run the game at half the frame rate, and it simulates the in-between frames. So you can really make a game that only needs to run at 36 frames a second, but people experience it at 72 frames a second, which is pretty awesome. But other platforms haven't built their own technology for this yet. So we need to do some super optimizations to get Noun Town running on those with the same number of objects per scene and the same kind of interactions and things. So every day I go on my computer, I'm like, how can we optimize Noun Town a little more? And often I come up blank.
Let's cap the manatees to 100. Starting.
Yeah, right? How many manatees is too many manatees? That is the question I ask myself every morning.
Normally we hear triangles, triangles, triangles. With you, it's manatees, manatees, manatees.
Yeah. Well, I actually. So this is another tough thing when you're building the game, that no one's quite sure how the best way to optimize a game is in terms of what you're optimizing, and also the best approach. And it's kind of different for every game. So we actually push a lot of triangles on screen, even though it might not look like it. When you go to a whole island, that's a lot of triangles. And so what we consider the most painful thing are batches, which is the number of the times the CPU asks the GPU to produce an individual object. So in Noun Town, sometimes it gets up to 1,500 batches, where the game is like, okay, you need to draw this, you need to draw this, you need to draw this, and also you need to do this 36 times a second. And so what we're trying to do is get our number of batches down from 1,500 to more like 200, and that will speed things up. So we feel in our game it's quite naturally low in triangles, so we're roughly okay. It's our batches which are a problem. So triangles and batches are the big Quest limiters.
Gotcha. Batches the same as draw calls?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, and set pass calls as well.
So the game, like flat screen version, or is that?
What was the question?
Any plans to make like a flat screen version to play on a Steam Deck or on a PC?
That is exactly what we're doing. Thank you for turning us into a marketing question. So, sponsored content. We just announced our desktop version. We're calling it desktop or isometric because we plan on bringing it to Steam and Steam Deck and Switch and hopefully Xbox and PS4. And that's interesting because we designed the game with VR in mind. So we're like, how can we keep the benefits of Noun Town with removing the hand-based interaction and the sense of space? So a lot of the, like in VR, for example, we have like chop something, wash something, fly, and you're actually doing these things. Now we have to kind of make more abstract interactions for those, which is quite interesting. So how we're designing those is different, and it'll be interesting to see how people respond to some of those differences. Hopefully, they think they're interesting and motivating and stimulating enough that they still kind of feel that embodied response to some extent. But we'll see. Hopefully, it'll be out in July or June. So do buy many copies. That would be great. Just 10
that's
each.
good. Yeah,
2's good. Thank you.
That's great to hear. Like, obviously, I'm into VR enthusiast and want everything in VR. But both Wookie and I, like my wife and his girlfriend, can't play VR just physically. Like my wife can't even have the headset on. Even if she's just sitting still, like for 10 minutes, like she'd get a headache. She gets a headache or like she gets nauseous at some movie scenes, so it's very unfortunate. So it's neat to have games go from VR. Like we see games start out non VR, come to VR, but and we've seen a few start in VR and then go to flat screen, which is kind of more rare. But it's nice to at least like this, like, hey, if I'm excited about this, I'm telling my wife, I'm like, I wish you could just put the headset on. And so when it comes to flat screens that she can handle, it's nice for me because I can then show her what I've been talking about and annoying her about for a while. So I can't wait to check it out.
And what we're trying to do, hopefully we'll succeed, is we're going to take all of the learning data that's in the VR game and create a way to learn the same things in the desktop game. And then we're trying to make this kind of Noun Town ecosystem where your save file can be linked between them. Maybe there'll also be a web portal where you can like keep up with your words on you go. Because we know like people, especially adults, they don't always get to put on their VR headset every day. They don't always get to the game console every day. But you do want to keep on track of your regular spaced learning. Yeah. So we're hoping we can go, okay, you've got VR, that's one way of accessing it. We've got desktop or isometric view, which is the other way. And then you've also got this kind of web view where you can keep on top of your learnings. This idea that your learning is however is good for you at the time, rather than just you're stuck in this space.
I love that look, that theory, and that lookout.
Look.
Yeah, that look.
Yeah, it's great the news that you're doing that because, like, you were saying, my girlfriend, she can't play driving. The only driving game she can play, she says, is the Mario Kart on the SNES. The only driving game that will make her sick. And if I'm playing like Grand Theft Auto, I have a projector up there. She's sitting on the couch reading something, and she can see any of the screen up here, like just a slice of the screen. That will make her sick before she knows it. Like she's not even watching the game. She just in there. She has to have like one of those reading pillows with like little arms on it. She puts that so she can read. She has to have like a shield. Oh,
that's yeah. Well, you know what? Someone was doing when I was doing some research for my PhD. Someone was telling me about it was a difference in the sexes between how we perceive distance. And men typically perceive distance using the put more emphasis mentally on perceiving distance between the convergence of our two different eye perspectives. So in VR, that's mainly what we fix, right? We put some lenses in front of your eyes, and then it helps you understand the distance that you're seeing. That's why we think of this as kind of 3D. Whereas apparently people born as women, place more mental emphasis on shadowing and the kind of structure of shadows to recreate 3D in their brains, and therefore why there's a lot higher amount of VR simulator sickness for female players is because that is not really accommodated, right? That's a game design choice rather than a property of the technology. So there's kind of this implicit sexism in the design of VR headsets and how they work. That's what I got told. I haven't researched any of that, so whether it's true, I don't know. But she was another researcher, and she was telling me about it. So it seems like
that sucks because shadows are one of the hardest things to do in games. So, like, if you're already pushing that limit in your shadows, you got to tone those down. Oh, that sucks.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I probably should have double checked that before I came on a platform and told everyone about it.
No, but people can find that.
Do your own research. Head to Google Scholar and type in some things. So yeah, right, it's sad.
Kind of my next question was, with your background, like, how did you, for Noun Town, like, obviously we kind of described like why you're doing it in VR and then looking at other options, but how did you personally like get into VR and programming? Like, is this your first app game, or have you done a few others, or where'd you come from, mister?
You invited me, man. I came from like this decade. So I've always been like into programming things since I was a kid, like back when the internet was like young and mysterious in the early 2000s. And then my early professional career was as a UX designer. So I spent a lot of time optimizing the journeys of websites so that they were less annoying and less painful, but also to an extent, just kind of, yeah. Well, you say that, but actually a lot of UX is kind of like not user experience, it's like corporation experience, right? It was going, how do I get a user to do what this company wants you to do on our website with the least possible friction?
Thanks a lot.
I didn't. Yeah, I know, right? I've just been manipulating you for the good of corporate overlords. You are welcome. So yeah, I kind of didn't. I didn't like that after a while. It kind of felt like I was just using design to make people do. And you know, it like people benefit from non-frustrating experiences and achieving what they want, but also some of it's kind of like, we are making it easier to achieve corporate goals. So which is the real benefit of this? So then I was like, well, what do I actually want to do? And I kind of got onto a funded PhD, which let me look at virtual reality. And at the same time as this, while I was at my corporate UX job, I was a digital artist. I was a new media artist. So I did a couple of exhibitions in different places, showing off like interactive technology to kind of make people think about how they interact with stuff. So, for example, one of those was I downloaded all my Facebook and WhatsApp and email history, and I took all of my messages, and I trained a chatbot to kind of respond based upon the history of all my messages, and I put that in a public gallery, and people could come up and talk to this chatbot version of me. It was rubbish, really terrible. But AI was worse back then. But yeah, and also kind of cringeworthy to see the things that it would say, because most of the messages were from my like early 20s, and I was like, oh no, that's who I was.
That's awesome.
But I guess that was like, I was always interested in this kind of like cutting edge or new ways of interacting or finding new ways or novel ways to kind of present these interactions with people. So in VR, I was really curious about what an action is, right? What does it mean to do an action? And this kind of stemmed from Grand Theft Auto 5. I don't know if you guys played it. Probably you mentioned you did.
No, just a little bit.
Just a tiny. There's that scene where it's a torture scene, and it's like press X to torture the guy.
Yeah, I remember car battery and stuff in it.
That's it. That's exactly it. And I remember being like, I don't want to torture the guy. Like, this is not how I want to spend my spare time. And that scene like plays in my mind a lot. So I was like, would that be worse in VR when I'm actually physically picking up the things and I'm attaching them to his nipples? I think maybe.
And then intimidating and like rubbing them together, the spark and stuff. It was like, I don't want to do this, but it's like they put so much work into this. Like, what is
right? And you can't progress without it either. So it's like you have to do this.
Like the Call of Duty airport scene where you got to like you're playing the bad guys for 5 minutes, and you have to kill like 300 people, and it's like I don't.
Yeah, exactly right. And I was super curious how would that feel if you were more immersed in that interaction. You were physically doing it. But I was also aware, like, often you play like, especially in VR, you play like a shooting game, and you're like, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. Next scene, they were bad guys because they were shooting at me. Dead, 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 dead.
Faceless Nazis or something, you know.
And I also thought that was super interesting. That I'd be like, would I be uncomfortable torturing this guy? But I'm like killing all of these people. I don't mind in virtual reality. So it was super interesting to me to like, how do you feel about these actions? And is there a difference? And that led me into language learning, because there's lots of research in the physical world about language learning and actions and gestures and not doing actions making a difference to how you think about things and how you form memorizations. So if you learn a word not doing anything, it's the worst learning. If you learn a word by gesturing without actually physically engaging with an object, so you're like pouring a jug of water, but you're not actually touching the water, you're just doing this. Compared with an action, which is picking up the jug and pouring the water out, there are different kind of memory traces, I guess, or memory experiences. And I was wondering if I could use that and put it in VR and see if there were any kind of differences or distinctions. And that would kind of give us some clue about how we cognitize our embodied hand-based actions in a virtual space. And that research, while it was going on, led to Noun Town, because I went down this language learning VR rabbit hole. And I did while during the PhD, we got to do master's modules. We got to do academic study for months in different subject areas. One of those for me was applied linguistics, which kind of led into this, talking about language skills. Led into this. And then my research kind of said, okay, actually actions are important in virtual reality. They do, at least in the small studies that I did, they did show a difference to not doing the actions, which means they are meaningful. And the actions were also different from gestures, which means when you think you're interacting with a virtual object, or when you are interacting with a virtual object, your brain treats that as different from just doing gestures without that virtual object. So that kind of, one, answered one of my big questions, but two, led into the design of Noun Town. And so Noun Town was based upon that curiosity about what VR can do, what is thinking in VR, what benefits does thinking in VR do, or the design of VR experiences for thinking, and also how can we best do language learning using technology. Computer-aided language learning is called in research.
Nice.
It's in depth, fantastic. I hope you guys all actually listened to that part.
Right. I'm so sorry. So many times when I get interviewed on these things, I'm like, here is a very long rant about
No,
5 minutes about.
That's super
the stuff
interesting.
that I think people would notice a lot of that, like intrinsically, but sometimes they don't have the curiosity to fully explore it, and they're just like, "Oh, that's weird," and then let me go shoot that guy and the dead body. I'm going to keep shooting it, or something. But it's a special kind of person, that would be like, how is this affect? Like, what's that whole next step? That's pretty rad.
Yeah, a guy with a lot of spare time. That's what you need. So
yeah,
it does help.
Focus, just be like, not lose track of any of those esoteric thoughts before you complete your little investigation. It's crazy.
Yeah, 4-year investigation.
So I'm curious. So Noun Town launched in December on Quest 2, and then was it 2 weeks on Steam VR after that or so? Have you had anyone, like content creators or just someone personally, sending you a message saying, "Hey, I've played this every day since it came out," and just start talking another language? Here's what I learned. Have you had anything like that yet?
No one has come up to me and spoke the other language, which is super disappointing, actually. But we have had so many people be like, this is really making me memorize stuff. This is helping me learn. I couldn't learn before, now I can. Words are sticking in my brain a lot stronger. And surprisingly, we thought this would be very good for beginners, but what intermediates have said is, 1, I get to pick up novel new vocabulary. 2, it's fun to just practice what I know. And 3, when I talk to the characters, some of those sentences I've never heard or experienced before. So there's actually something for me in the interactions with characters.
Nice.
So it was nice to hear that it's like going across the spectrum of language ability. And just if like some of the reviews we get are so like complimentary and kind. And we've also got like I know everyone probably says that. We've got the best Discord community. We've got about like 7,000-8,000 members in there. And people are so passionate and interested and engaged, and they're sympathetic to what we're doing. And we'll do something stupid, and they'll be like, guys, it's okay. You're trying to make a new way of learning. So it's all right. You've done this stupid thing 3 times in a row. So it's just great.
Discord is so interesting and has become such a support tool for devs, from what I gather, like, because we talk to a lot of devs, obviously, but it is so interesting that basically a chat thing which has been around for a long time, but just giving the devs like support in that channel to like directly communicate, like with indie devs especially, like it's just so insane how that's grown over the last couple of years to me.
Yeah, and ours was very deliberate. Like when we started working on it, we were like, we're going to have a Discord, which is where the team is going to do all of our communication. And it's going to be the same Discord where people can come talk to us. So like anyone who's working on Noun Town is in there in the same place where the community is, and
That's
so we can
awesome.
have those conversations. Yeah, it felt like it made sense, right? I want people to feel like their experience and their experience of the game is super valid, and what they say is really interesting and useful to us. And also, when they say nice things, like that makes our day. When people are like, "Oh, this was a great experience," it's like it's not like I would love if gamers knew that, like, for these small studios, like what they say, we get to see it, and when you take the time to like leave a nice review, it kind of like brightens up everyone on the team's day. We're like, ah, great, it was worth it. We're not just pushing this into a void and no one's engaging with it. So that's why one, our Discord is so great. We have that communication, and two is so many people are so willing to offer up their time to help and be interested, and that's super like great for us. Like not only is it flattering that people want to do that, but it's also amazing that the amount of skills that we can get. So our QA is mostly volunteers. Like it's almost entirely people who are just giving up their time, being like, yeah, we'll test the release for a couple of days before you put it out to everyone else to make sure that nothing's terribly broken. And that's just like people taking time out of their days, probably busy days, where they could be doing all kinds of other things, and they're willing to share it with us. And like we check all of our translations, but we check that with volunteers, and we also get first source translations from volunteers. So like everything has this contributions from the community at the heart of it, and that's like super nice for us.
That's awesome. I say that, and I'm like in like 200 Discords, and I like time is a thing. Like, there's a few that I make sure to check in regular, but the rest, it makes me feel bad sometimes. I'm like, I haven't talked to them for like 4 months. Like,
yeah, we do notice. We're like, where's that guy? He was so passionate like 6 months ago, and then you're like, is he dead? I hope he's okay.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice little community tool, and it's just amazing to me. Yeah, and I forgot my next question.
I could talk about Discord for another 4 hours. That's
So, I remember what I was going to say. And so I often with anything, with any app trying to make me learn shit, I go back to like my high school days, like old, young little PJ in a high school room didn't do well because high school rooms are boring, and he tried to make them more entertaining and interactive to the chagrin of his teachers.
It's called disruption.
Yes, I know. But I had a Spanish class, and I was just telling someone that I spent most of Spanish class in the hallway because of my disruptions. Yeah.
And you're like, I was in the hallway.
There's a funny story there that I won't share. But if this was a thing back then, like I could probably be living anywhere in the world right now speaking languages, because this really captures my focus and helps me learn, to where the old classroom teaching, even with great teachers and all that, is just like, to some people it's like, this sucks, I don't want to be here, unfortunately. So
no,
I think this is amazing.
That story, it resonates super well with me. I was my French was my worst class at school. I was we had to learn French or German. I went to my German teacher. I was like, do you think I should learn German or French? And she was like, you should learn French because you're horrible at German. And then I was also horrible at French. And so like I can feel that so strongly, and this is what Noun Town is for. It's for a lot of people who struggled with traditional language learning. Like, but that's kind of where we take the keys from in order to make this game. It's like, what was bad about the way that we teach languages, and how can we make it better? And often people keep giving me like recommendations. They're like, you should speak to this polyglot. He speaks 9 languages. He'll give you the clues on how you can put that in the game. And I'm like, I don't really want to speak to them, because they are already good at language learning. The existing methods are working. I'm trying to come up with methods that work for people who struggle or get disinterested by it, or just have been left behind by the way in which we already teach languages. And so I'm more interested in talking to people who are like you, who are like, I had a terrible time. It was the worst. I don't know how. A lot of people didn't see a way in which they could learn a language before we showed them this. And then they're like, oh, actually, I could learn a language like that. I really think I could. And that was the best praise we could get.
it legit makes me want to literally learn Spanish and then go find my old Spanish teacher and be like, look, look what I did.
It's you know, I feel
Because-
bad about this because language teachers are great. They have impossible. How do you teach a language to
Yes.
30 people at the same time, right? It's like impossible. What I would love to see is people like get to spend 30 minutes in Noun Town, and then maybe they could summon the teacher in when they're stuck, or afterwards they could talk about what they'd learned with their teacher. And I feel like that would be a transformative experience for learning.
And you could have conversations about, that would build more association. They should.
And I say that like I'm not dissing teachers at all. Like it was just myself. Like I've had 3 teachers literally say like the first time they had me in their class, they're like, "You're very disruptive and you're a terrible student." And by the end of whatever term semester you want to call it, whatever it was, they're like, "You're my best student ever." Even if I didn't learn anything, like I have a couple teachers like that. Like you're just awesome, but you failed the class.
That's a funny old high school stories because I was 2 years younger than PJ, so I was coming up a little bit behind him in the same school. More than one teacher had our last name and looked up with like that look, like from a television sitcom, like crap. And I was like one guy's like, "Are you going to ask me what makes Rice Krispies talk?" Like the biology teacher, and I'm like, "What?" And all this crap. Because
I thought that would have stayed for 2 years later, like still in that guy's mind. Like,
It still does because I ran into him a year ago, and I'm very old. Well, not super old, but like I haven't been in high school for a couple decades. We'll put it that way. And I asked him my first time. I'm like, because it was a science class. I'm like, what would a chair look like if our legs bent the other way? And he's like he stopped class. He's like, okay, you guys at study hall. He's like, I don't know how to answer that. So yeah, it was weird. I don't know.
He's not teaching the core important material that needs to be learned.
Yeah. But I had the same guy for anatomy, and I was good at dissecting things, but to remember and name things, and we'd color these charts, and I just scribble them, and he'd hang them on the wall. He's like, "That's awesome, but you failed."
And
it was weird.
Bringing it back to language and gamification, in that French class where I made an ass of myself by saying, "This used to be La Jeune Fille, I'm a little girl." Bonus points if anybody remember that. I got so good at French, and I don't know if it was the teaching method. Student teacher was hot. Maybe I paid attention. I don't know. But the older lady who was getting ready to retire, and so she was training her, replacement. She liked me so much. I was so good at learning French, and I don't remember hardly any of it now. But I was playing this Versailles game where it's like a click-through video game mystery on her PC in the mid, what was that, 96 maybe? But,
I remember having a demo of that, I think.
It might have been the same one, but that was my French class for the whole semester because I got so good that she's like you said, teaching 30 people at a time. She's like, I don't need to worry about this asshole. Let me work on the 29. And I'm just over here learning words from the video game. And I'm like, I found the locket. She's like, because there's stuff you got to find. Like there's a secret door. You got to twist the candelabra after you learn how to say candelabra and whatever, like that. And she was like, how did you find the locket in the middle of class? And it was really funny. So,
yeah.
But I didn't retain it. And that's the huge problem. So I'm hoping stuff like this will, anybody can memorize and learn if they spend enough time, but it's all going to go away if you don't experience it. And I think this is the next bit.
We've talked many times on the podcast how VR is tied to memory, and you remember things feel real. Some people dream about after being in VR type of thing. So I think that lends really well to learning, like you guys are saying.
Yeah, it's can I pause 1 second? I need to grab a power cable for my Quest. It's been so used in the development, it now can't last an hour. It's very sad.
Gotcha.
I'll be 1 second. I'm going to do the limp body thing that happens when people disappear.
Okay, you'll speak Spanish the entire time you're gone.
Spanish? Did you just mix Spanish and French? Because that's perfect.
I just did. It's too early for this.
Spanish. I'm a Spence teacher, which I don't know if I want to bore him with another story of high school, but then that's where there was a lady that taught French and Spanish. So I had her for
Yep.
Spanish and the other lady for French. I was taking both in that 2-year span because I was only at that high school that you graduated from, like 2 years. And she said, and this is still traumatizing me, so this is why people need therapy, because you get traumatized and you keep it. She said, if you ever catch me speaking a word from the other language, we'll have a pizza party that Friday. And I've caught her. I don't know if it was multiple times. My brain wants to say so, but it was at least once because I'm sitting there, I'm in French class, in Spanish. And she says something in French. And I was like, that's French, bitch. And she was like, it is not. And she was so mad because I can catch her. PJ just invented another language you need to put in Noun Town
Sure.
called Spench. It's a mix of Spanish and French.
I'm pretty sure my dad speaks that. I have some terrible memories as a child of him
That's
saying
awesome.
definitely the wrong language in the wrong country. Just being in the back of the car, being like, why aren't these windows tinted? How can I not escape this situation?
Haven't invented those little pull-down visors yet for babies.
They need those for like teenagers to hide from their parents in the back of the car.
Don't look at me. I'm emo today. But the VR and learning, and this is going to sound weird because Americans, and I don't really want to condone gun violence because it seems to be on the rise, but we first started playing VR, we're playing that Pavlov game that everybody's played a million times, I'm sure, and we had to figure out how to reload the guns. And the big light machine gun thing especially was like, where do I put the belt? It was really wicked. But some games have a certain gun that is in a lot of video games. And we had some interesting times with some neighbor people. So now I own a gun and I've really wanted to, but I bought the fancy Spec Ops gun because I was like, well, I need something that's going to maybe get me to the gun range to learn how to use it. And I picked it up and I knew how to reload it before I knew how to disassemble. I didn't read the manual and I was like putting the things and I was like, how do I know how? Oh, VR, because you're pulling the bolts back. Like this one's a really weird, it's different because some of like the M14s, you just pull these things back. And thankfully the games had the little marker. But I was like, I just picked it up. I'm like, holy crap, because you got to pull this handle out and it turns it into a lever and then you got to pull that back. But my brain was like, I do this for this gun. And I was like, did I just relive a memory from somebody else?
It's like the Matrix. The knowledge was just downloaded into your brain.
Yeah. Because I was just like, chunk, and I'm like, wait a minute. It was so weird because it's such a weird mechanism. Like, I don't think I've ever any other guns like that. And I was like, I can't explain how strange that thing was. So the only thing I can think of is because my brain already had the muscle memory, even though had never held the gun before in real life. So there's weight and all this other stuff to it. Really heavy, heavier than it looks. And then just the fact that my left arm was like, oh, you just do this. And it's just like, where did that come from? It still weirds me out. So VR, repetition, it feels like you're in the moment, like it's not just a video game. You're actually, the chair is actually here in my visual space. So I think there's so much more VR could do for learning. So I'm excited that PhDs too much time on their hands at some point in their life are just making it work.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. Is like the question now is not if it works, but what it works for, and also where we can make it better than the real world, and whether that's accessibility or cost or just like much better learning outcomes. Where like each of these will be different for each subject, and it will depend on how the game is designed and made. But I guess that's the question we're trying to make. I think we're past the question of can we learn in VR? Will it be good for learning? But what is it good for? How do we make it good for this subject?
And like you said, with like, the Welsh language shrinking and stuff like that. I love languages and I love the historical things on that stuff. If somebody would say like, if you uproot your life, move over here to Wales, learn as much as you can and make some sort of little VR role-playing game about Welsh history, so it teaches people, like mixed teaching in with the game, I'd be like, yep, I'd do it. I would totally do that. Like, to keep the language alive is like a noble pursuit, but then to help people learn it, and then to find out all those neat things about a historical culture, all this stuff, because some of those words in Welsh are like, what? Like, I don't know if you know it, PJ, if you've seen it before, but you'll have, like, correct me if I'm wrong, because you might have more knowledge of Welsh, anything, but like, I think I've seen words that are like 20 characters long, and there's consonants upon consonant. Like, I don't know how to pronounce it. They're
Yeah, it's
wacky. No
it's a
offense.
fascinating language.
Yes, fascinating is better than wacky, because it's like, just look up like news reporters saying Welsh words, and the people get accolades for like nailing the word. It's so nuts, but
Yeah, it's
I don't want it to disappear.
It's amazing. You see it and you're like, this is an amazing language that is totally impenetrable to me. If I was to look at a textbook to try and understand that, I'd be like, I'm not going to get anywhere. It's just impossible. I mean, people do learn it from textbooks, I guess, but not for me. It's
How do you learn that pronunciation? Because like, if you learn anything about the English language from one side of the pond or other, consonants don't do that. You got vowels. You need some vowel in the middle of that. Like, our brain works in
the
such a way
Wookiee
that you can
approach to Welsh.
you just smack my face on it, see if the letters stick, and make a word out of it. Like, our brain works such a way that you can take a word. I've meant to do this in like Warcraft, because I made a chat add-on for that before. But like, take each word as it gets typed, mess up every word in the middle, but as long as the first two words or the first and last word are the same, your brain can skip over and kind of get it, and you can still read it. It looks like complete gibberish. That's like Welsh, but the words are like 40 characters long.
But I think just mixing the audio and video and all that together is super like important and helpful, because you hear that from people that read a lot of books. Like, that's the first time I've heard that said out loud. I thought it was this, type of thing. So, like you said, if you don't hear it, you don't really know how to pronounce it anyway.
Yep.
That's that famous Simpsons bit when Marge is like, run like the wind. And Lisa's like, it's wind, Mom. And she's like, oh, I've only ever seen it. But yeah, it happens especially in second languages, right? You're like, is this the right thing?
Yeah.
And that's why in Noun Town, actually, for every object, we have like 4 speakers. So every time you pick it up to your ear, you'll probably hear a different speaker saying it, because we were like, we don't want you to just hear it once. We want you to hear it from how lots of people would say it.
That's awesome.
God,
yeah. I think you and the team are doing amazing work with this. Like,
I build.
Like, we say it a lot of times on the podcast. Like, we're gamers from growing up and stuff. So that's how we got into VR. But apps like this that teach things, or bring humanity forward, or culture forward more than other types of gaming, have really reached me more than just straight up like a shooter in VR. Like, these things interest me way more than games ever have, and that's weird to me, but it's also awesome. So
yeah, it's nice. It's nice for us to use it as like a thing, like, we can feel good about ourselves. We're improving humanity, but also like I feel that it also presents so many novel types of interaction that we have to try and solve and try and present to people. And I honestly think that's what a lot of gamers want in all fields, right? So often you see, especially in the field of like first-person shooters, I guess, is you feel like, oh, it's in a new setting, or they've added this new singular weapon. And I'm like, I want to be able to destroy the wall, right? And then the AI responds to the cover. That was in Red Faction back in the early 2000s. So why have we stopped doing that? And why are we not doing
breaking down the wall with a hammer?
Like this? Well, you could fire a rocket launcher as well, and it would you could tunnel using rocket launcher blasts between 2 spaces, and I just think about that a lot with first-person shooters, right? I'm like, we've got really good at reproducing this standard first-person shooter mechanic, and we put in like tiny little different things. Like Apex Legends has a lot of movement in it, for example. But I really want to see for me, one of the amazing things about Noun Town is that we had to come up with whole new ways of interacting that we weren't expecting, and had to try and solve those. And some might be a little clunky, some might feel very intuitive. but it's nice it gets to ask those gameplay questions, right? But
Yeah.
so often I feel like games are not, especially AAA games, are not really asking those big gameplay questions. And I think that might be part of what is stimulating as well, right? Is you go, Noun Town, that is weird. And some of it's weird good, some of it's weird bad. Whereas a lot of games are just like, oh, it's quite good, but quite safe. And I wish we had more, like, more weird, you know?
Yeah. And
I mean,
I know
I remember
Noun
when we
Town's
stopped playing Call
focus.
of Duty so much. We stopped playing Call of Duty so much. It's kind of exactly what you said. It was like Call of Duty Ghosts when the Xbox One first came out, and you get it on like the 360, and you'd get a free copy of it for the next console. And the only thing different about it was they added like a knee slide. You could run and then hit crouch, and you'd go sliding for a ways. So you could skip across the doorway and shoot while you're sliding or something. That was it. It was kind of like, what? And then I don't think we played it.
That was a short run.
And there's one, I think we played like one of the other Black Ops games. But
Yeah.
where's the ingenuity with all the money going into that?
Right. Yeah, that's it. And that's maybe like a very ignorant thing for me to say. Maybe there's huge things that go on behind the scenes that make a smoother experience that I don't understand. But I want something like that feels, I want something that feels weird to me. That's what I like in games. Is I open it and I go, this is different. I mean, all beautiful and very story driven, but
I like to pop the headset on, just encounter something I've never seen before, and I love the feeling of not knowing what the hell's going to happen, you know? Because like in a normal traditional game, Call of Duty, I'm going to do these missions. As great as it is and as fun as it can be, I've done this. Like VR allows you to like you literally popped into a world with a lot of titles, and you're like, okay, what the hell am I? Why am I here? Where am I? Type of thing, and you just explore. So it's really.
And I have a big complaint about the Meta Quest interface, for example. So as soon as you put on the headset, you're essentially greeted by like a flat world that you can't do anything in, and then like a UI, like a flat like phone menu UI, and you're like, come on, this is like, why am I not seeing like avatars of my friends moving around in the virtual game that they're in to the right hand side, and I can go over to that and look at it, or like the games in my library are like 3D representations that are playing out a little in front of me, or like why is my interaction in this basic space not spatialized? Instead, I've got Steam on a headset view, and that is, I'm sure that's great for a lot of people, but for me, I'm like, come on, we've built space, right? We've built space, and we've built this thing where we can do stuff. Let's use these parts.
The original Rift Home was awesome because you'd have the game titles on a table. You could pick it up, put it in a console, and it launched the game. It's like, that was awesome. Why did we take that away?
I'd spend time like organizing the games to look like it was lived in, and the thing with TV and the table there, and you'd pick up that game, and like that was so cool.
Yeah, you know what my Rift Home is like super weird. There's this giant like turtle that's like floating in the air up here, and there's a dinosaur whose head is half out the floor, and then my stuff is floating in space out the windows. I'm like, great, I'm glad I can do this, right? Because this is, I don't have to arrange it like my house in the real world. I can like, yes, I can put like laser targets outside the neighbor's house and shoot because it's VR. I can do what I want. And it's super cool. I really love every time my Quest loads into Link mode. I'm like, oh, my home. I wish we could bring some elements of like interactivity and gameplay into those things. Weird VR. I love weird VR. That's my.
As long as they work. Because sometimes I load into Steam VR, playing across the VR desktop or virtual desktop into the PC and stuff like that, and you load into Steam Home, and everything's like stuck and frozen half the time. Like, sometimes it works fine. Sometimes I'm trying to get into a game, and it's like I don't want to troubleshoot the menu here. As long as that stuff works, the UX thing is okay, and I'm all on board.
No, that's true. We have that trouble a lot developing because we have the Steam version, so we switch between runtimes, between like the Oculus runtime and the Steam runtime, and Quest headsets and an index. And the whole computer is just like, what are you doing? Why can you not just pick one VR thing to experience? Why? So Steam is quite problematic for us sometimes in terms of easy VR that's bug free.
When it works, it's the best thing ever. That's only so often.
Yeah, I'm super into those photogrammetry like settings. There's a really cool Steam scene inside like some guy's house somewhere, and I used to love having that as my default Steam, being like, well, look, it's like this kind of ghostly, weird copy of someone's place with like artifacts everywhere. It was yeah, awesome. I love that. I should have that in my course.
Yeah, something in the Oculus Home had like photogrammetry stuff if there was like a museum. And the girlfriend, again, she has to sit in the front seat of the car. She'll get car sick, that kind of thing. She put it on, put the headset on. I'm like, easy now. And she was like, just thought it was so neat. She kept like, turning and spinning around. I'm like, this is not going to end well, but she was having fun. She's like, it was worth it. And she spent like a couple hours and like sitting there by the toilet in the bathroom, and it was just night ruined. But she was like, that was so cool. But again, she can't do it. It sucks.
Oh, that does suck. We need to work on the shadows. Then we'll see that.
Yeah, on that same topic, like I think it's Drift Space VR. It's an app where people can just upload like their captured media. And one of the coolest things I think, because I live in Wisconsin, I've done some traveling, not a whole lot, but I like to experience other culture stuff. So like you said, just being in someone's home from another country and just looking at it, it's like, that's really freaking cool to me. Like just seeing different things that I would never see in a million years. Like there's no way I'd ever be in that person's home in real life, like ever. Thank God for them.
This guy again. Why is he?
Just to see how like, just layouts and like knickknacks and things, like it's just interesting to me. It's really cool. It's
photos of Sweden, and there's like a lot of like, it looks like a carbon copy red house. If you've seen that, like a lot of them look very similar, and they're like just deep red. And then the insides are like the most clean, futuristic space you'd ever see. Doesn't match the outside of the house at all. I'm like, what's this about? It's different from what I'm used to. I want to know why. Seeing other cultures. Cool.
It's super cool. And the only thing I would say about them is, and it's not like for the real photogrammetry ones, I'm like, these are amazing. For computer game environments, I remember this with Arizona Sunshine, being so frustrated that like I was like, this environment's cool. Go to pick something up, can't grab it. Go to pick something up, can't grab it. And being like, no, my whole experience is tainted. Yeah. So maybe I'm asking too much, but just a beautifully rendered photogrammetry place where I can pick up every object. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Well, is there anything we didn't get to that you want to talk about with Noun Town or yourself?
No, I think that's covered. I promoted myself as being like a qualified PhD. I've told people to buy Noun Town. I've tried to convince people of our future plans. Yeah, I think that is it. I would say to people like, please come try it. I do think it is a really, like, if you hated language learning, then come try it. That's what I would say, because
I would agree with that 100%.
And stick with us. Like, we've got a long-term plan. We have like a couple of things. We want to push language learning forward, and we want to do it affordably. So it's like a $15 game, which we want to update indefinitely. So our hope is we can just keep getting new sales, and then we can keep updating Noun Town for years and years to come with more learning content, and turn it into like a full system. And that's compared to like in a marketplace where often you have to pay for a big subscription, which costs like $60 to $100 a year. Like, we hated the idea of that. So we're like, can we do this in a way where it's affordable and helpful and useful? So if you like that idea, then also please come support us. Join us in our Discord. The link is at noun.town, and then you can click the link. Join us in Discord,
all links
guys.
In the show notes for both audio and video as well. You can just click on it there, join their Discord. We'll pop in.
Please
you
do.
interrupted the group hug.
Yeah. Maybe we can like do this. Nice.
Like a kaleidoscope swimming thing.
We have to make some interpretive
like
dances.
The Mario game.
Yeah.
I don't know if you chose these avatars out of necessity or speed, but I think they're great. I think you really there's a lot of character that comes across with like this
See,
We
we get a mix
right now, but I still want to leave them in there after we've updated and we don't need it. It's going to be like a special character avatar. But like the best time we've had, like some people just rip on them and won't even like join us because of it. It's weird. And
Yeah.
one guy we had on, I always forget the name of games. What's that Asian RPG, the anime one? I see it on Twitter all the time and I retweet it.
Oh, Dyschronia?
Yeah, Tales of Dyschronia. Sorry, Dyschronia something.
Oh, you're thinking of I'm really bad with names.
G in it.
Isn't it Meiji?
Ruins of the Magus.
Ruins of the Magus. Yes. We had the dev from that on, and he didn't go. We were in a different space, and he didn't go make an avatar. So he was like a cube head with pill hands, just kind of like this. And his interpreter had like an avatar. So he would be, it's Japanese, and he was the most animated person. It was the best time to see him go like when he's thinking, you could tell he was like crossing his legs with his hands, and he was so animated with nothing. And I was like,
and then he started doing moves from the game. I'm like, all right, we have to do all the Street Fighter moves. Like,
he was creating fighting moves. Yeah, and he's like, super punch.
Yeah,
just a little imagination.
That's it. I think a little goes a long way. I think photorealism is often quite overrated. This is what I'd like to do. I'd like to take all the AA studios and be like, take your AA like super realism budget and spend it on weird stuff to put in the game.
Creativity. Yeah.
Like for me, don't steal this, anybody. I don't know. As far as I want to take avatars, I want to put a marker in the game where you just kind of draw, like you don't take your head off, but you just draw your face as you see it in your camera and hit OK, and it goes away, and it's just like drawn on your little orb. That's it.
Oh, man. It reminds me of the Joker. Actually, it's kind of sinister. Scroll on your own face.
Yeah, just crayon. I'm the Joker. But you're right. That probably would be a shortcoming.
I know we're trying to end the podcast here, but I just want to run something by you guys on this topic. Because you see like enthusiasts, air quotes, VR enthusiasts, like, hey, I've played Half-Life Alex. It's ruined VR for me. I can't play anything else because nothing else is as good. I'm like, that's a complete rubbish statement. I think it's, and I'm going to be a bit of an ass here. I think it's like personal creativity and stuff, like a game that has terrible graphics, but it's fun. Like your mind should fill in the hard, rough spots and just allow you to have fun with that title for, to a point. Because we talk to devs and we help share their games and stuff. And then I see people like attacking those games. I'm like, I've had more fun in that game than I have on a $60 game on my Xbox with a very nice setup. Like, you can't tell me that game isn't fun. And it's just like, maybe you're just a boring person. Your imagination can't help people with that. I don't know. Does that sound ridiculous?
Get in the way. You got to manage your expectations. So
yeah, we have like a lot of we have some critical reviews, and some of them are very fair, and others I feel like that's different to what we were presenting, and so there's a gap between the expectations and the thing that you've got, which is always a shame. But I do agree with you, and also I think that one of the big things about virtual reality is like as soon as you're in, you want to touch and grab and move and interact with this. And games that kind of trade that off in response for just being attractive is very sad. So I think the reason people like Alex so much is it's super interactive and also gets to be beautiful. And one of the big complaints people often have are things are beautiful, but then not interactive. And I don't know, like Gorilla Tag, for example. Everyone loves Gorilla Tag, and those graphics are from the PlayStation 1. So it's like, totally. I think a lot of people come on board with that, and even the weirder things. Okay. I definitely think some people struggle with, and then unfairly complain. Like someone is trying something totally new here, so maybe give them some more slack. But I just think if every VR dev looked at themselves and went, how can I utilize the fact that we have hands and we can grab things and we can do whatever we want to the world and it doesn't matter, right? Because you can reset it at the push of a button. Then we'd have like a world of really interesting VR games that can only be made in VR, and that would be super, super cool. And some of the one I think about a lot is, have you played Brass Tactics?
Yep.
Like you
Love that
see
game.
the focus of the other person's head and what they're looking at. And I love that, right? You don't get that in another game where you can look up and see where the other person's head is looking at the battlefield. So you can do secret tactics because you know they're not looking this way.
I was just going to say, because growing up with Wookiee, playing split screen games on a TV, like we both could tell each other just without even looking, just know where they're at and how to go kill them. It's the same with the Brass Tactics. You kind of look where they're looking. Oh, they're not looking over here. Sneak attack time. Like
I haven't played that, but is that like an RTS where we would all be playing on the tabletop?
Yeah, exactly.
So like you're doing your moves over there, and if I can like, oh, what's that? And then like sneak my spies over here, and they're in the shadow. That would be such a cool idea.
Yeah, that is it. And the other thing, what is that thief game? Some kind of 2 words begins with P. You play like a criminal doing raids or something. I can't remember. It's on normal desktop PC, and they made a VR version of it. Anyway, I was playing with my 2 friends who were on their PC, and they were like facing where they were facing and shooting the bad guys in their field of view. And I was like turning around, looking one way, shooting over my shoulder, throwing grenades behind my head. And the ability to like break the sense of focus with a sense of interaction is unique to VR, right? You can't do that on any other medium. So let's get more games where you're like having to look in some direction, but do something in this direction, right? That's a cool thing.
It's funny because we play No Man's Sky a lot, and I play VR 100% of the time when possible. So you'll see me running through the lobby going like this with my hands, and everyone's just like they're like a robot.
Yeah.
They're all like pointing at you like
the Nexus where there's a player hub, and PJ's running around and you're able to do your hand motions, and it translates to the other game. It's not just like in-game animation. And everyone else doesn't. They're just standing here like this. They'll crowd around PJ, and he's like grabbing them and like it's weird, but everyone's like, "What is he doing?
Who is this guy?" That's it. Right? And how can we use this? How do we use this to make better games?
When looking through reviews and things, and I look through reviews to see how players are reacting to games. I don't care what people like review games as, because I have my own opinions. But I know they're important for devs, so they're But for VR, it's like those are N64 graphics. I'm like, yes, they are, and I fucking love that. Like that's all VR needs is N64 graphics. Just get in there and let your imagination do the rest. And if the game's fun, you're gonna have fun. Like I don't know. Weird.
Yeah, no, we hear that a lot. When we were developing it, a lot of like comments on Reddit, which were some of the meaner ones, were like, why have you got this PlayStation graphics? And I was like, have you tried pushing 200,000 triangles on to 2 screens at 76 frames per second, both of which are higher than HD resolution? Like it's really difficult. And also like you can make it look really beautiful. Like look at Darth Vader, for example, the Darth Vader experience. But the size of the face was like this, right? And then it was like walking to the next space, and it's like this, and it's like there are real limitations, but I don't think they have to be like negative ones. Like I think things can be stylized. I do worry that maybe people are going to get like a bit too bored of this quite cartoon shaded style, just because it's the only thing that we can really afford a lot of the time, as in like graphically afford. But I do think people look back on this as a time period. Like you look at PlayStation 1 graphics and you're like, okay, it's you can tell by the blocky textures and the weird, like when you get up close, the straight lines kind of become bent. And there's like this real aesthetic style there. And I feel like the Quest 2 era will be marked by a kind of aesthetic style a bit like this and Job Simulator and kind of what we can do with the technology. But yeah, I think it's a fascinating time, and it really does upset me when people are like, it doesn't look like Half-Life Alex. Why would I play it? Come on, man.
To be fair, Half-Life Alex doesn't have a lot of interactions. Yeah, you can draw on things and pick up some bottles, and they have liquid in them. But what do you do with that? Like you can't, unless they've patched it. I haven't played in a long time. You couldn't even melee things that were stuck to your face. So if you ran out of bullets, like I should be able to do something here.
Yeah, that's true. You know, though, I remember seeing the thing that made me fall in love with it was when one of those like face hugger clones jumped to them and they held up a chair and it hit the chair and they threw the chair out the window. And I was like, this is what every moment of every VR game should be, is like this whole interaction with the world and the outcomes. I hope we get there
Yes.
soon.
We need to make it a Waffle House brawl game where you grab the chair and flick it.
Right? That would be great. And also, like, I think if we move away from realistic styles, we can do like super unrealistic things, which would be awesome. Like having 10,000 people that you're fighting with. You know, like that Matrix scene in
Yeah.
Matrix 2 when he's fighting like
Rubber
a
Neo.
billion. Yeah, exactly. Right. Suddenly he turns into a robot. Yeah, doing that in VR, super, super cool. And you could do that with lower graphics but more agents.
Weird story about that. I was going to 3D animation school when the movie was coming out, and so was like, the second Lord of the Rings movie had just dropped, dating my. So everyone was like, CG, computer graphics, animation's awesome because Gollum and everything, and Weta and digital. And then Rubber Neo came out, and it like slapped every one of my like classmates. And they're like, "You got to take this seriously." It was like, that was really bad.
You know, I know someone that worked on that, and he gave me like a really like normally like you talk to these people and like something has gone wrong, it's not well perceived, and then you talk to people behind them, and they're really like smart and interesting, and they give you really logical reasons of why it ended up like that. And he didn't tell me, and I've totally forgotten. But when he told me, I was like, "Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, that is a shame that it ended up like that." And it's always the way you're like, "Yeah, this is not great in the end."
Like, yeah, because then
Spider-Man did the same thing as well, I think. Like the Spider-Man film that came out around the same time ended up looking super rubbery. I don't know what it was.
I don't remember which one that was.
Maybe it was the Andrew Garfield. I don't know. Time is so hard. And it happened in a generation.
I think that'd have to be the first run, yeah, of Spider-Man. I don't remember. Yeah, time. My wife asked me stuff about my like childhood. I'm like, I can't. Time for me, like I can't just see a timeline of my life. I actually go by like Pearl Jam albums. Like, okay, that was this album. This is what was happening, and then they started spacing those out because it used to be every 2 years. So it kept me on track for a long time. And then they started spacing them out. I'm like, time's lost to me now.
It's good to have a touchdown.
Yeah. Well, we've gone way over our hour. I don't want to hold you hostage. It's been amazing talking to you. Yeah, big fan of Noun Town. I think it's amazing. I think your theories are all working, in my opinion. I love all your choices so far. I hope you can work out everything you want to work out and get it to the other devices. That would be awesome.
Well, thank you for having me on. Thank you for your kind words. No one's ever said I love all of your choices before. So I'm going to quote that every time the team is like, Jack, this is another stupid idea. I'll be like, hold on.
If you guys need a tiebreaker, just send it my way and I'll be like, that one.
I'm just gonna write it on a card and I'll be like, PJ loves all of my choices so far, so tough. Yeah, thank you for this. Yeah, right. Thank you for your podcast as well. I love that you are doing this in VR, right? Making use of the medium. It's super cool. It's nice. It's much nicer than a Zoom call, even though I can't see your faces. I can imagine, and you're both so handsome and cool looking.
Yeah. I'm putting that on a card and it's going on my fridge.
You guys have twin cards, both sides. One side, PJ likes all of my decisions and choices, and the other one's like, Jack thinks I'm handsome.
Yeah. Thanks for making that weird. But yeah, and if you guys ever have like updates, you want to come back and talk, we'd love to chat some more. Yeah, maybe by then I'll have learned most of Spanish.
Yeah, we can just do this in Spanish. Although I'm learning Japanese in it, so we'll have to talk cross language.
Maybe I'll switch.
My girlfriend, I can't wait for your desktop version. She teaches herself language. She knows a bunch of Japanese, and she's been learning Chinese at the moment. This would really be right up her alley.
Yeah, because Chinese is hard.
Yeah, she's got pen pals and Weibo and things like that. So it's super impressive that she's able to like string sentences together and correct herself. This would really probably help out.
Yeah, I hope so. Let me know when the desktop version comes out. Do let me know. I want to make sure that it does. That's our big thing, right? I know we're ending the podcast, and we tried to end the podcast like 3 times, but I
Well, you
love
hang up
hearing
first.
whether it works. Yeah, right. I should have let my battery drop out. Just
The chaos. We don't know when the podcast will end.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jack. It was super awesome meeting you, hanging out, hearing your stories.
yeah, anytime. See you again for Noun Town 2 in 2035.
Anyone watching, listening, all the links to their Discords, the game, all that stuff will be in the show notes. Check it out. Come back next time when we find out if Wookie is a little girl.
Say it.
Just la Juvie.
Close. That's damn close. Je suis is I am. La June means young, I believe. And then June is La June Fille. F-I-L-L-E, I believe.
There.
Still
Hopefully you've learned something today. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Catch you next time.